awesome.
Awesome.
That was awesome.
You guys are awesome.
No,
You're awesome.
no.
You are awesome.
Sir, you are awesome. Seriously.
Awesome. Awesome. Awesome.
Everything is awesome.
What's weird is I'm as much of a morning person as a night owl. Like, I go to bed at 2 and get up at 7, and like I'm up and ready to go. And I don't know. My wife is neither a night owl or a morning person. She gets sleepy and she's not like a mean sleepy or anything. She just gets delirious. But when she's not ready to be up in the morning, you want to tiptoe around that.
Yeah, I used to work overnight, so for like probably 4 to 6 years, and I mean, mind you, that was a long. Like, I've probably been not working overnight for longer, and I've just kind of recently like gotten used to waking up at like 5 in the morning, 5:30 in the morning, and working off it. But I can't go to bed early. Like, I usually have one night that I pass out like at 10, and I get and sleep till 8, and get like a full like 10 hours.
See, I would do that, but like, I don't know, a few years ago when I used to work, I used to manage a retail store, and I would have my like late nights, stay up till 1 or 2 in the morning doing whatever, go to bed, get up at like 7, go to work, and about once every 2 weeks I'd come home for work about 6 o'clock, eat something, and then just pass the fuck out, like black out at like 7 p.m. and then wake up at like 7 the next morning. And I would do that once every couple of weeks. It was just like I'm just pure exhaustion. I have to rest sort of thing.
That's how it was with the job that I was overnight, because I traveled too. So a lot of it was travel. So I couldn't sleep when I worked overnights, because I also had to like drive to the next place or get ready for a flight. And then I would come home like at the end of the week, and the nice thing is I had 3-day weekends. So like the first day of that 3-day weekend typically was me just sleeping,
just catching up on all that sleep you missed.
Yeah. All right. So hopefully this time is the charm.
I recorded something on Zencaster Monday night, and I had no problems, and I'm not in incognito mode, so this should all be good.
Supposedly he put a warning in now when if someone logs in that mode, highly recommending that they don't.
Yeah, well, that's good.
So
I'm pretty much good for an hour tonight, if we can kind of keep it around there. Maybe I forget exactly how long you had run it before.
My goal is always an hour, and then if it goes longer, then like that, as long as you're cool with it, then that's fine. So we'll try to keep it to an hour then.
Well, what I can do, because I mean, I don't know, like right now I'm kind of tired. Once we get going, I may perk up, so I'll give you a hand raise once it's getting to be about time, if that works for you.
Yeah. So the hand raise for when you want to end it.
Yeah, just essentially like, hey, let's start wrapping it up. I'm falling asleep, but we'll see, man.
Very cool.
I don't think it should be a problem. I'm not feeling like I'm about to pass out or anything, but I don't know. We'll see. I just don't want to get to like an hour mark and be like, cool, we're still going. And I'm like, and just barely holding it together, you know?
No, I understand. That's perfectly cool. Like I said, like I had Aaron McGathy on the other day.
Oh yeah, I saw that. That's pretty cool.
Oh my God. Well, we can talk about it. I'll say, because I want to talk. I'm going to do a bonus podcast where I talk about it. But I literally was like, the entire time leading up to that, like going live, like sick to my stomach, and like, because like she's one of the few people in the podcasting world that like I like admire and look up to, or maybe not look up to. That's a weird phrase to say.
I know what you mean.
But like I guess idolize. Like ever since I started the long form interview podcast, like I've really latched on to like her, Aisha Tyler, and Kevin Smith, and I like my jaw dropped when I sent the email, and then like 2 days later I got the response of, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, totally, I'll do it.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Like I didn't even know she did podcasts until like a few months ago. I just knew her from that Harmontown documentary.
Yeah,
That's the
yeah.
only
So I,
thing
see,
I knew
I
her
never
from.
watched the documentary, but I listened to Harmontown on the podcast.
See, I was a huge Community fan,
Yeah.
so I really wanted to. Like, I saw that documentary on Netflix and watched it, and that's where I'd heard of her from. And then I followed her on Twitter like a year later, or I don't know how long, but a while later, and I was like, oh, she has a podcast. But I'm behind on about 50
Oh
podcasts.
God. Yeah, we're gonna call this the start of the show.
Okay,
We'll include all that too.
okay,
Welcome to Deja Vu Cast for Jason and I at least.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna even bear the lead. I already announced it. Welcome to Everything Is Awesome, the show where we sit down and talk to awesome people about awesome things. And I guess to make this short, because we've said it 2 other times. This week's guest is someone who I found out through Party of One podcast, instantly latched on to his podcast, and just fell in love with it. Fell in love even more so with it when it went to a more of a campaign. And because now I'm falling in love with the characters that his team have created. And please welcome to the show for the 3rd time. Well, for you guys, the first time, maybe like the first and a half time, or however you would say that in normal language. From Too Cool for Tabletop, Jason Ashley.
Yay! Hello.
Yes.
This time we are determined that the curse of me is not going to ruin whatever we record.
Oh my God, yeah. So as we were, heard us talking about, we were talking about podcasting, and if you look at my phone, I'm months behind on podcasts that I listen to, because since I have been doing this show, I've picked up a lot more podcasts. Too Cool for Tabletop, Party of One podcast, a lot of local podcasts that are in that Facebook group that I'm in. I've picked a lot of podcasts up just from I guess talking to other podcasters, and so now and now that I have like I think 6 in the bank that I have to edit, I'm like so far behind on actually listening to them. But yeah, Aaron McGathy's podcast. So do you listen to This Feels Terrible, or
That's the one that I saw, but I haven't, dude. I don't right now. I'm listening to no podcasts. Like, I'm one of those people that gets really easily overwhelmed if I'm like, oh, here's a cool podcast, I want to start listening. I'll listen to a couple episodes and I hear about another podcast. I'm like, that sounds cool, I'll check out an episode. But I can't mix and match. Like, I got to start with one and listen to that one, and when I'm done, I'll go to the other. Like, it stresses me out and I get overwhelmed, and then I just don't listen to any podcast.
Gotcha.
So right now I'm listening to nothing. The only podcast I listen to, and this is going to be the most masturbatory thing ever, is my podcast, because I edit it, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I don't listen to. I'm not a big music guy. I've and I'm sure there's numerous things that I've been on that document that at this point, but I've always been more of a talk radio fan. Like, when I don't know if they did it down in Texas. Have you lived in Texas your whole life? Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I don't know if they did it down in Texas, but in like New York and Philly and LA and a couple other big markets, they changed. I think CBS Radio went to the free FM format where it was just all talk radio.
I honestly don't know, man. Even when, I am a music person, and my whole life I've never really listened to the radio. Like, I've always been like cassettes or CDs or MP3s now. So I don't know, man. There very well could be, but I would not be the person to ask.
So when that happened, I was like, oh man, this is my jam. And like, so I've always just listened to talk radio, whether it be,
I like how people talking was your jam, not like people jamming.
Yeah, no, like there are like, I do like music, and I will, like, if I'm like, for instance, when I have Sirius, I go in and out of having Sirius. It's usually when it's free or whenever someone gets me like a subscription for whatever. I'll listen to Alt Nation all day long. Like I love I guess the alternative rock and punk, and I will listen to it. And if it's good, like around here we have Radio 104.5, which is essentially the version of Alt Nation with commercials, and more mainstream bands than Sirius has. But and like I like I kind of still am stuck in, like, I guess the late 80s, early 90s of like bands that I like.
I still hold to that 1994 was one of the best years for music like ever in the history of music.
I won't spoil it on this episode, and I can tell if you happen to remember, I'll tell you after the show. But in the episode before this, where I talked to Aaron McGathy, we go into a little tangent about music, and probably around, if I had to guess, 94. I forget when this band was around, but there's a mighty embarrassing band that I was a huge fan of. Like, and I'll give you three guesses. I don't think mid 90s embarrassing, and I don't think you'll get it.
Yeah, dude, that's a huge list. Like, I wouldn't even know where to start on that one.
So it is. I won't spoil it because
the Goo Goo Dolls.
No.
Am I in the ballpark? Is it that? See, I liked some of the Seattle stuff. I'm gonna go on record and get shunned by a lot of people and say that I never cared for Nirvana. I'm still not a fan of Nirvana, but I loved like Soundgarden and stuff like that. But I loved and still love Weezer. Like 94 was when the Blue album came out, and to this day they are still my favorite band. And that was, 94, so it's been a long time. But Green Day Dookie came out. Possum Kingdom by the Toadies came out. Like so many good, like just, essential 90s rock band albums came out in 94. Granted, I think like fucking Korn and shit came out too, which in my high school years, I was a big fan of that. I'll also go on record to say that. But there's just so much good music from like 94 to like 96. Like those couple of years, even in 98, like that's when I feel like there was still some kind of innovation with rock music. And maybe it's because I'm an old grizzled asshole now, but like I hear modern bands like, what's that band? And I know there's a lot of people that like them. People I know, Imagine Dragons. I'd only heard them on like pop radio. I thought that was like dance music, like pop music stuff, and then I see them and it's like a full band, and I'm like, y'all don't even sound like you're a full band. And that's my old man Jason rant for this episode.
It's you. There are plenty of band. Anything you can name, anything from the last probably decade, and I really don't know it because even when I was kind of listening to music when I first started podcasting about 10 years ago, I'd say within the first year of me podcasting, like I quickly switched to like indie and local because that's what we promoted on the show and we tried to get interviews with. So like all my music was that, and podcasting was just coming out. And like for me, when that was like that was huge because I'm like, oh, I can just listen to people talk all the time on my my iPod or whatever it was back then. Like I was so ecstatic about that. So I really, like I'm not a great person like to like if you're playing, I guess, Quizzo and it's like a music question, like I'm out. Like unless it's a legitimate question about someone from the late 80s and early 90s, maybe the early aughts up till there, but that's pushing it.
See, for me, it would be mid 90s to like into the end of the 90s, into the early 2000s. Because like before that and in the late 80s, like I just listened to the music my parents listened to, and my parents listened to shit. Like they listened to they listened to pop country music and like Christian pop radio and stuff like that. Like to this day, I can sing a whole ton of Amy Grant songs and Michael W. Smith songs, which if your listeners don't know who those names are, good on you. Good for you for not knowing. But that was the stuff I listened to just because my parents did. Like I was having this conversation recently. The first few albums I got when I was actually getting my own music were purely it was music based on movies and TV shows I liked.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
I got the Street Fighter the movie soundtrack, and I remember those are the first two CDs I got. My grandma bought them for me. It was the Street Fighter the movie soundtrack, which is nothing but like hardcore '90s rap. Which I was a kid, man, I didn't like that, but I liked Street Fighter. And then it was the Ren and Stimpy album from the TV show.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, no, dude. It but before that, like when I had cassette tapes, like Like, I remember I had the cassette tape for the Flintstones movie, the one with John Goodman in it. Like, I had that. I mean, but that one had like it had Weird Al's Red Hot Chili Peppers cover, the Yabba Dabba Yabba Dabba Yabba Doo Now. Like, had that shit on there. There was like a Jello Biafra song on there. Like, it was kind of a interesting soundtrack to own, but I don't think any of that like helped form my taste in music. It's just I was a kid. I liked Street Fighter, so I bought that CD. You know.
Yeah, I don't, my taste for music, I don't know where it comes from because my parents are heavy into country. I'm not a huge country fan. Like as I've gotten older, like now I can kind of appreciate some country.
See, I like actual country music. Like I don't like the shit on the radio where it's practically like pop music but with like a slide guitar in it. Like I like old school like Hank Williams and stuff like that. Like I like that kind of country. I can genuinely enjoy that.
I can't even tell you what, like there may be a song that comes on that's country and I'll like I can appreciate it now. And then like my dad was huge into Elvis, and again I guess like in hindsight as someone in my 30s, an adult now, like I can appreciate it, but it's so not my thing. And like my first cassette, at least the first cassette I can remember owning, was the Back to the Future soundtrack.
Oh man,
which
Huey Lewis in the News, man.
Yeah, which I would stand by saying without looking at it, like that's still a good soundtrack. Like I
would say for nostalgic reasons, it's a good soundtrack, but I've to this day don't understand how Huey Lewis and the News were ever popular. They're just such a weird band. He practically talks through every song, but you know, I love that movie, so I also love that soundtrack. You know.
And then I know another soundtrack that I had, and it was on CD, so I don't know how many other things I've had up at that point, but the Mask soundtrack.
Oh, dude, I had that on CD as well, with fucking Cuban Pete on there. Yeah. I used to jam that shit.
Yeah, and this is like how bad my music is that like
that's still your favorite album? Is that what you're going to tell me?
Yeah, I have it framed.
Platinum.
I would venture to say that all those CDs, up until probably about a decade ago, were probably still in my car.
Oh wow!
So I mean, I'm also a huge Fresh Prince and Will Smith fan. So like I had a lot of that.
Well, I said I managed a record store for like 4 years. So if I got a new CD I didn't like, I just sold it back to the place I worked at. So I might have a skewed perception on that topic.
Well, and there's and I think from our last conversation, you mentioned something about a band that you were in, and right? No,
yes,
was that you? Okay,
I've been in several. Yeah.
So like you're clearly a music person, like. So I expect like you to have knowledge on at least music from when you were coming of age. Like me, Howard Stern, Kid Chris, Opie and Anthony. It's the Dopes on 93.3 up in this area. I forget their names now because I'm not a fan of them. But like it's purely a talk radio guy.
Yeah, and see that was never me. I don't know why.
And for me, I think like my dad did listen to Stern in the car, and probably shouldn't have been listening it with me in the car, but you know, it's the same reason. Like I think that being a Kevin Smith fan also influences me on liking talky things because he is a big talker, whether it's on podcasts or his actual movies is all dialogue heavy. And that was introduced to me by my uncle at probably again a far too early of an age to be watching Clerks. And so like I think all that influenced that. Yeah, that's the other
that's
night
like one line I remember from Clerks, but it's such a good line.
The 37 my girlfriend sucked 37 dicks in a row or 37 dicks, and then I think it's Scott Mosier goes, in a row. That I always remember. I was so happy the other night. I was watching flipping through the channels, and there's evidently Showtime has a station called Showtime Women. And not Kevin Smith, Chasing Amy was on. And I was like, oh, I gotta watch this. This is like, A, I haven't seen it in a while. B, like, I could probably cry tonight. Like, why not? Like,
I could go for a good sob.
It's, that movie, that's the one movie, like, it's a guarantee I'll watch it, and I'll always smile during Ben Affleck's monologue and Silent Bob's monologue.
His monologue, Silent Bob's monologue, is a good one in there. But you didn't know that shit.
They're both, I've always been like, they're the two monologues, like, that if I ever had to do something where they said you have to like memorize the monologue, like, they always would be it. And I finally had the opportunity. It took me, I guess that movie came out, I think that's a 97 movie. I think it's, no, yeah, I think it's 97-ish.
I mean, around that time, yeah.
And so 97 to last year, so however long that is, if whoever wants to do the math out there,
like 8 years.
Yeah. So that I had a public speaking class that was an online one, and we had to do something where we basically either recited a book or a monologue or something. It just had to be X amount of minutes long, and like both of them I think they actually fell too long. They were like 30 seconds too long, and there was no way for me to speed it up without it sounding unnatural. So like the chance that I had, it was like, nope, sorry.
Squandered, man. That's a bummer.
Yeah. So yeah, that's our musical rant for the day.
There you go.
And I don't know how we got there.
Do most of your shows start with the rant?
There's always, yeah, typically. And then there's a little bit of conversation about the guest, and then more rants. I want to say I had Brian Durkin, who is the host and creator of Full Belly Laughs. It's a podcast from around here. And I think we talked for 2 hours, and at the hour and 40-minute mark, I said, we should probably talk about you a little bit. So I think that's the longest I've gone with that like being way off topic.
Yeah, I don't think that's an intro at that point.
Yeah, that kind of broke the mold. But that's like, so this is something that I've kind of discovered over the last few weeks doing podcasts. And I think I kind of like talked it out on last week's episode with Aaron, where like, I kind of like the way I've always envisioned this show was more of a conversation, like me having a new guest co-host every week versus like an actual interview. But we also do the interview where I know at least our first episode we did a classic interview.
Sure.
But I've always envisioned like this show being sound more like a conversation, something that you would hear maybe over here at a bar or something, versus like a straight Q&A. I don't know. It's more interesting to me that way when it's an actual conversation. Hence the reason, like, I never really do any research on my guests. Like, I try to do as little as I can. If they're a podcaster, I try to listen to a episode just so I'm informed, but that's about it.
Gotcha.
I'm going to be airing. I don't know if I'm going to get it out before... Yeah, I'll get it out before this airs. I'm going to be airing. I think we have a half hour of good content from the last time we recorded. It was like
After
the last
we
half
discovered
hour.
Everything had crashed, and then we BS'd for 30 minutes.
Yeah, so that's going to air as like a bonus episode. So
It'll be
and
the preview for this episode.
Exactly. But so why don't we just go and obviously people know that you're Jason Ashley, know that you're the host of Too Cool for Tabletop.
Yep.
But at this point, I don't know if they actually know what Too Cool for Tabletop is. So please tell us about your podcast.
Well, Too Cool for Tabletop is a show that I host where I play tabletop games with people who generally are not the kind of folks who would play a tabletop game in order to prove that no one is too cool for tabletop. So, I have a friend of a friend who is not the kind of person who you would ever see play D&D. I have them sit down, we play D&D to prove to them that it's fun and that it's not this weird niche thing for weirdos. And that's pretty much it. And our first season was a lot of one-shot games, which for those of you uninformed, one-shot games are like you play for a couple hours and the game is over. Once we got into 2016, we kind of picked up into more of a campaign, which is essentially an ongoing game. We've got... we're up to, I don't know, by the time this airs, how many episodes we'll have out. But as of this recording, we've got 35 episodes total. So I think like 23 of those are, I can't math at all. So I think I'm going to say that 23 of those are campaign. So it's been going for a while, and it's fun. Essentially the idea with the campaign mode, because with our little quick one-shot games, you'd play for an hour or two. In the end, I would ask the guests, so now that you've played it, do you think you're too cool for tabletop? And it's always been, no, that was fun, except for my wife, who still thinks she's too cool for tabletop. But that's okay. I married her, so at least I have some cool person in my life. And with our campaign, it was a little different because we've had the same two guests since January. And so with that, it's kind of, we wanted to start with two people who were completely uninitiated with this stuff. And then over the course of this campaign, whether it's 6 months to a year or whatever, you get to listen to them turn, to start as, complete noobs to this, newbies that know nothing about it, and hopefully end up as people that are extremely familiar with it, that love it, and it's a part of their lives now. So that's kind of the quest we are on.
Hey, we're taking a quick break just to say thank you for listening. It's been such a cool ride doing this podcast. I've certainly done other shows that I've done longer, in the hundreds of episodes, but this one here, so far, Everything is Awesome, has been my most favorite. I love talking. I love sitting down and talking to new people, so I get the chance to do that every week, and it's great. I don't want to take too much of your time, so you may have seen on Twitter me teasing a little something that I was going to drop. I don't have all the details right now, but screw it. I'm going to announce it. Ladies and gentlemen, because of you guys being so awesome, sharing the show, helping me get great guests like Aaron McGathy, like Jason Ashley, like, oh God, there's been so many, Garrett Smith, there's been Tal Klein, there's been, oh my God, there's so many, Mike D'Angelo, all these cool guests are all here because of you. And I did not mention everyone because they weren't worth it. It's just because I have a really poor memory, and getting hit in the head with chairs does a number to you. But thank you all. Because of you, not only are we booking some really cool guests, but now we're doing our first live show. That's right. We are going to the Philadelphia Podcast Festival, folks. So I'll have more information as it becomes available, but come the end of August, we're going live. We're going to the Philadelphia Podcast Fest. We're doing things a little differently, so it's not going to be the same show. We're planning already. It's going to be so fun. I can't wait to share more information as it becomes available. But let's get back to the show. And big thanks to Jason Ashley for designing our new logo, if you haven't noticed it. Back to the show. And it's I enjoyed the one shots. In fact, I never even thought about listening to a campaign version of a tabletop game or podcast because I came to you from Party of One podcast. Yep. and that whole gimmick is one shots. So like it was a nice way for me to ease into your show. Because I was already used to the format. You were a guest on Party of One. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to check out Too Cool for Tabletop. And like, maybe it means nothing because who am I? But like, you weren't the only tabletop podcast, that I listened to that came from Party of One. But I can definitely say that, I believe you're the only one I still listen to.
Oh, that's cool.
That was a guest, and it's now I can't really speak for I don't want to speak ill of the other shows, but for me, what I liked for the one shot that separated you from Party of One was that it was you and a group, and specifically like you and I want to call him Simon James.
Yes.
You have a co-host, like a weekly co-host. That's the same person. Mm-hmm. So like there was, I don't know, it was something about that. Like one of my favorite type of podcasts, has always been like just two best friends sitting around talking. And like, that's kind of, especially like in the bonus episodes that you guys have done, just you and him, like that's, you can hear the friendship, it's just, again, kind of listening in on a conversation between two friends.
Yeah. It's just that comfort and ease that you can tell two people have, I'm kind of in that same boat as you. And I definitely am not speaking ill of other tabletop or campaign podcasts. But there's a few I've listened to, but there's far more that I've tried to listen to. And And where I get held up, and I didn't realize this until kind of recently, talking to some other people that run some podcasts or they have Twitch shows where they play games, is that with this stuff, man, it's not so much a game to me. I don't see it as a game. I see it kind of as collective storytelling.
Yes.
And I actually mentioned in the last episode we recorded, which is episode 35, at the very end, there's this big combat thing, and it gets to the point where we're not even rolling dice. I'm just like, this happens, what do you do? I get so into the story and what's happening that I don't care necessarily about, did you roll high enough to do it? And I think, but the comment I make at the end of that episode was, if you're listening to this episode to hear how Dungeons and Dragons games go, like, I'm really sorry, because this is nothing like how they really go. Yeah. And I don't know. And I come from another system that I really like, called Dungeon World, which is very strong narratively. And we do a lot of one shots in season 1 of the podcast, but there's not a whole lot of dice rolling. It's a lot of just what the fiction says makes sense is what you do. So I'd much rather sit and use these mechanics, use these dice rolls sparingly when it makes the story interesting. Because again, we're telling a story, in my opinion, and even more so, we're doing it on a podcast. Yes. I think that's the problem I've had with some of these gaming podcasts is people are playing the game perfectly, like to a T, like they know the rule book inside and out. But that's not really interesting for me to listen to. I mean, when a third of your podcast is silence and the sound of, when you hear that over and over.
I love that you have dice just next to you.
Well, I'm recording this at our table where we play. Okay. That's where all my podcast stuff is. Yeah. But you know what I mean? I would much rather fudge a dice roll or just, ignore it altogether to do something exciting for people to listen to, because the whole point of a podcast, at least our podcast, is to entertain. Yes. And you talking about me and James, BSing and stuff, he is the sole reason. I mean, I specifically asked him to do this if he was interested long before we sat down to ever record anything, before I decided I wanted to do a show, because I didn't come from podcasts about role-playing games. I listened to Nerd Poker on Earwolf because I liked Brian Posehn and a lot of those people, and I liked their show. But they're stand-up comedians and comic book writers, so they're interesting people right off the bat. But mostly I came from shows that were comedy shows that were, and interview shows. Like I was really into Comedy Bang Bang and stuff like that. And so whenever we started to do this podcast, that was my template. It wasn't all these other gaming podcasts. So I think that, in my opinion, and I hate to sound like I'm patting myself on the back or anything like that, but I feel like we approach this with a different mentality. The whole point of our podcast was for people to listen and have fun. Like our little tagline is, a podcast for role players and everyone else. The idea being, if you're into these games, you can listen to it and get something out of it. If you're not into these games, you can still get something out of it, because there will be an interesting story, hopefully, and it'll be funny because we goof around the whole time. So that was kind of the pitch, I think.
Yeah, and it's definitely the storytelling for me is what gets me is that and I've never played Dungeon World. I actually recently purchased the rule book so that I could learn the system. Yeah. And like we started, and we've only released one episode. Shame on us, because we should have released at least a second or third one by now. It's as I mentioned earlier in the show, like I'm so far behind in everything that it's kind of I'm gonna this weekend I'm listening to everything, and it's weird playing with so the group that I play with. They like combat big time.
Gotcha.
But the rules are, again, they're playing. We play with D&D 4.0,
mm-hmm. Which is very combat heavy. That's essentially like a tactics kind of combat system.
And but like it's a very loose definition of those rules. It's that, and I'm assuming that tabletop games are typically like house rules more so than a strict following of the rules out of the book.
I think that just really depends on the group, man. Like every group is extremely different, I've discovered.
I've really, save for your group and what Jeff does and what I do, I really don't know much I mean, I've started listening to Jeff got me hooked on Campaign, the Star Wars campaign podcast, and that again, I don't know because that's using a system I'm unfamiliar with. So like, I have no idea if they're following the rules or not. But like D&D, I don't know the rules to a T, but I know that we're not playing to a T.
Yeah.
But like they just like combat and like they want to solve. They're like before I joined up officially with them, they were just kind of like going from scene to scene with no storytelling in between. Well, the first session I played in, I corrected that right away, and I was like, let's role play. And then we just last weekend we played our second session for a couple hours, and like after the fact, my buddy who's the DM said like I was gearing towards a battle with these pirates that you ran into, but like I made it my mission. I was like, no, there's no way we're going to talk our way out of this. And like everyone else is like, I want to set fire to this boat. I'm like, no. I could talk. I just helped like the guy into the building. I can talk my way into this where we don't have to fight. Maybe we make an ally, and that's exactly what happened. And that, like, to me, like, was the best session I've ever played, which isn't saying much because I think I've played maybe three full sessions in my life. But everyone there said that like that was the best game that they played.
Well,
and
I think that really says something because I mean I agree. Like something like that is far more interesting than listening to everyone take turns hitting one another. But I mean, as a dungeon master, that's a very important thing to do when you're first sitting down with a group is determine what kind of game you're going to play. Like, you know, you don't want a dungeon master who wants to tell a big, you know, mysterious story with plot twists and hooks, and he's playing with a group of people that just want to go through dungeons and kill stuff, because neither of you are playing the same game, and so no one's going to have fun.
Yeah, and I think we've now discovered that okay, we know that like I think the DM wants to tell a story. I want to tell a story, and at least like I think there's people there that are just there to like have something to do because like they're not like they play and they get into it in the moment and times when they need to, and then there's some people that are like, I want to set fire to something. Yeah. And like that was actually, it was a lot of fun because when that conversation was happening, it was all in game. Like it was all my character talking to her character saying, no, let's not do that. Like, here's why. And like, so it was just a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Cause I was slightly fueled by the, you know, the storyteller in me, but it was something my character would do. Like, hey, let's not do this. Like, let's not fight our way out. Let's talk our way out. So yeah, it's the storytelling aspect is just so much fun. And like the bonus episodes that you've released recently,
where we kind of world build a little bit.
Yeah. Like that is super interesting. I'm in the middle of 32.5, which you released today, I believe.
Yeah. The one with Chris where we do, we talk about his Dragonborn Paladin character.
And like as I really liked the first one you did with Madeline.
Yeah.
But this one's like even, I think because, and again, we've discussed how I'm not huge into, as much as I love D&D and I love writing fantasy, I'm actually not a huge fan of watching or even reading fantasy.
Yeah.
But there's something about dragons that like that always will get me, and I guess that's the kid in me. But like, and again, like I said, I'm probably about halfway through it, but like you could tell I like it because I've said like I think 60 times in the last 2 minutes. It's such a fascinating thing to listen to you guys world build, and that kind of harkens back to the podcast about two friends sitting around talking. Yeah. Like I think that is what you bring to Too Cool for Tabletop, because even during like a normal episode, there's a lot of banter, and I think that's important. It sets you apart from the other ones, I should say.
Well, and it was really important to me once we started putting the show together because in the first like few months of doing the show, like if my dogs would enter the room, we have hardwood floors, so you hear a little tap of their toes, and they would drive me nuts. I'm like, oh, people are going to hear that. People are going to hear that. And then, start talking to listeners and they're like, that makes it genuine. Someone puts their cup down and you hear it like dink on the counter. And I'm like, oh God, I wanted to edit that out just because I'm wanting to make it tight and professional, yada, yada, yada. And the more people I talk to that are listening, keep commenting on how much they enjoy that it just sounds like it would sound if you sat around with your friends and played D&D. And so I've kind of come to embrace that because whenever I play, before the podcast, when I'd be playing Dungeon World with friends and stuff, at least a third of half of our sessions were someone making a joke, it just completely derailing our game, our group, and we laugh and make jokes about it for an hour, and it's just something we do, and then we go back into playing. Now, for the podcast, I wouldn't necessarily want to do that because it's like, hey, here's 15 minutes of us just laughing. But I definitely like to keep it light around the table, and I have a really great group of players because they know when to dial back the goofing off once the story gets more intense, or at least the story gets more detailed, where there needs to be a focus on what's going on and people need to pay attention. That is one thing, man. And I know they're going to listen to this, so I'm going to thank them right now. But I really do have to thank the people on my show, James, Chris, and Madeline. They're an excellent group. I've played a lot of games with a lot of people. I've played with fantastic groups. I've played with absolutely 100% garbage groups. And to play with the people I play with is awesome. That's I love being the dungeon master. I love being the narrator and kind of putting the basis of the story together and then letting them alter it. That's really exciting for me. So I don't know, man. I'm just very lucky. I lucked out with these three being a part of my show. So thanks, guys. Love y'all bunches.
Yeah, it is one of we'll go out on a limb and say I listened to 4 tabletop podcasts, and as far as a group, and maybe I'm a little biased because
I've been on your show.
Yeah, we have grown to know each other now, beyond host and guest. But I genuinely enjoy, like, I don't know the other 3, and I enjoy them. Like, the whole group is great. I love the banter between whether it's in character or not. Madeline and James. I love how Chris is kind of like the quiet one, but when he has something to say, it like delivers.
Well, at the end of 32.5, the little bonus episode we're talking about, I tell Chris, like, one of the questions I ask him is, what role do you feel that your character takes in this group, and what does your character think? Like, what role does he think he's fulfilling? And I essentially come out and tell him that I feel like he's the group dad. He's like the dad of this adventuring party, because seriously, James will do whatever. He'll do something random and chaotic because he thinks it's entertaining, and then Madeline will do something very emotional because she's very emotionally tied into this, and then Chris is the one that comes in that's like, all right, kids, you gotta go fight that monster, like, let's get your stuff together. And it's perfect, man. It works out so well.
It's impressive that, like, I feel like and I don't, let me know if I'm spoiling anything and we'll cut it out, but I feel like Madeline, when you first started the campaign, was like going to be the person that you had to sell hard on this game, and she's like the most into it.
Oh, dude, the bonus episodes, right? So I did one with Madeline, which you've already heard. I did one with Chris, and that same day I did one with James. James and Chris both did their episodes in the same day. Madeline showed up with 8 pages of notes. Chris and James showed up with nothing. And they were like, we'll just talk about it. I'm like, that's fine. That's totally okay. But I mean, you can hear the difference. Like, I've heard James's episode because I've been editing it, but listening to those 2 episodes, it really is kind of more bantering and us bullshitting. And then we slowly start incorporating elements of their character with the elements of the world I've established and put it together. But with Madeline, like, I asked her a question and she flipped through 3 pages of notes and like find her spot so she could tell me about it. Man, like, Madeline, she started, we all started that one day. We recorded the first few episodes and that was like on a Saturday. By the next Saturday, she bought all the D&D books and like dice. Like she just immediately got into it, which I didn't know Madeline before this. I knew Chris a little bit, but I didn't know her. And it's just funny because as soon as that first session was over, everyone left and I came downstairs and my wife was like, "How did it go?" And I was like, I could tell immediately after the first hour that Madeline is going to love this. And I was right, man. She's really into it.
Yeah, and I think you definitely can tell that as the show progresses, and I love it. It's one of my. There are as going back to the beginning of the show, many podcasts I'm behind on, but yours is one of maybe we'll say 4 to 5 podcasts that I make sure I listen to within 24 hours of its release.
Oh, well, thanks, man. That's nice to hear. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's you do a really good job with it. I really like so with me and podcasting, like I started off as just a host, and someone else produced and edited the podcast. So when I left that show and started doing my own, like I kind of thought that like my purpose was to talk, record it, edit it, and whatnot. And I eventually got to a point where and it was when I was doing live shows through stickcam.com that like, well, there's no point in me editing this podcast now because it's already seen hundreds, if not thousands or more eyes have seen it like in its purest form. So what's a couple more going to hear it in its all natural form? Who cares if there's some blunders here and there? So like to this day, I've kind of adopted that motto of like kind of just whatever happens. I'll only edit at the request of my guest, or if I said something really fucked up, and or like I think with I forget who it was with, but like with somebody I dropped the name of my job. I was like, I probably shouldn't name drop my job quite yet. I haven't hit probation yet.
That actually happened with that same night we did Chris and James's bonus episodes. We played a little one shot of a game with Chris James and Chris's wife, and right in the middle of it, Chris name drops the place I work, and I was just like, I'm bleeping that out. I do not want that shared around. So I totally understand that.
But yeah, like so I've picked up on like now as you guys have gotten about late 20s, early 30s into your episodes, like letting the fact that like I picked up with the first time you guys talked over your intro, and I kind of always assumed, well, they're doing a tabletop, they're doing what I do, they cut the intro in later, like there's no need to play the intro when they're there. But like that little, like now that I know that, it makes your show even better.
Oh no,
and
dude,
like,
that's our hyping up, man. Like right before the show, like everyone's sitting at the table right before each episode. Everyone's like getting their paperwork ready. Where someone's on their phone, we're dicking around, showing someone a video or whatever, like people do. And then I'm like, "Are you guys ready?" And everyone is like, "Yep, we're ready." And then I hit record, and then it plays our theme song, and like we all like sit and just like Madeline like headbangs to it, and like I air drum to it, and everyone just gets into it. That's like our hype. That's what gets us going. And then as soon as it's over, we're live and we're going. And that's why I feel like when the episode starts, it's usually pretty high energy because we just amped ourselves up to do it.
Okay, we're going to cut right there, folks. Just too much Jason for one episode. That's right. We're going to continue our conversation next week with Jason Ashley, where we get into a little bit more techie details about podcasting. And, of course, we're going to go nerdy. We're going to go pop culture. We're going to talk Marvel. We're going to talk DC. We're not going to stop there. It's a whole lot of more conversation left. I also want to take this opportunity. You heard it in the break, but I want to explain a little bit more and say a big thank you to Jason for designing the Everything is Awesome new logo. Just in time for the Philadelphia Podcast Fest, which I also mentioned we'll be going to this year and performing live at. But Jason, who is a busy guy, you've seen him over on his website, Too Cool For Tabletop. .com or tctfpodcast.com. You've seen how busy he is with running his own contests, running his own show, and doing everything here and there. that he could possibly do to make his product so good. As I said during this podcast, it is truly the one show that the only time I ever fall behind on it is in a holiday, which was this week. And I only fell behind by 2 days. I finished listening to it the other day. So it is absolutely one of my favorite podcasts. Go check it out on iTunes, SoundCloud. It's on everything. You can go to toocoolfortabletop.com to find out where to listen to it appropriately. Make sure you follow Jason and all the social medias at TCFT Podcast, at TCFT Podcast on Twitter, on Instagram, and I believe even on Snapchat. I don't know the Snapchat. I'm afraid of the Snapchat, so I can't tell you for sure. But check them all out on all the social medias. Listen to the show. It's fantastic. If you like good storytelling, if you like good storytelling is key, and also another key thing is the way they do the podcast is very much in the vein that I enjoy podcasts, and that's just a bunch of friends sitting around talking as well. So if you enjoy talking and listening in on friends' conversation, and you also like good storytelling, Too Cool for Tabletop is the show for you. Check it out. TooCoolForTabletop.com. And of course, again, big thank you to Jason for the new logo. Love it. I've been spending all day today on the release of this, rebranding the site, awesomepodcast.com, rebranding some images and stuff. So hopefully you guys see that coming through. You can thank Jason for the awesomeness that is that logo and the new look of the site and stuff. And hey, next week, speaking of part 2, that's going to drop on July 13th, somebody's birthday's coming up. I turned 32, the big 3-2, that's not a thing, on July 13th. So if you want to be part of the show, why don't you give us a call at 267-223-4965 and leave a voicemail. Say happy birthday to me, tell me to fuck off, whatever it is. Leave a voicemail, tell me what you like about the show, what you hate about the show, and we'll air it on the show next week during our commercial break. I prefer not to say what you hate about the show, and just wish me a happy birthday. Why don't we focus on that first? Wish old Kev boy a happy birthday, turning the big 3-2. I would love to hear from you, and I'll personally address each one of you during that commercial break. Probably not. I'll try. No, I won't. And so thanks for listening. We'll be back next week. Oh, and don't forget, on Monday, I don't know why you'd forget, I didn't even tell you yet, but don't forget Monday, bonus podcast time. That's right. We're going to have a bonus podcast with the one, the only Jason Ashley, which will be from our second attempt at recording our interview, where we dropped everything. We lost everything but the last half hour. So we have that we're going to air on Monday, the 11th. And then we skip on over to July 13th, and I turn 32 while listening to Jason Ashley in part 2 of our conversation right here on Everything is Awesome. Follow us on the Twitter at Real Awesome Podcast. Follow us on Instagram at Awesome Podcast. Follow us on the interwebs, awesomepodcast.com. You can follow me on Twitter at HHWST. I'm also on Instagram at HHWST. And that's it. That's all, folks. Go home, get some rest. I know I'm tired. I had too much fun listening to Jason talk about Too Cool for Tabletop. I had too much fun listening to Too Cool for Tabletop this week. Oh, God. I'm out of breath. We'll see you next time right here, only on awesomepodcast.com.
Everything is Awesome is produced by Crude Humor Studios. For more information about the podcast, please visit us online at awesomepodcast.com. Or if you're interested in advertising on the show, please email us at advertising@crudehumorstudios.com. Stream and download all episodes on iTunes. While you're there, please consider leaving a 5-star review. If you're a fan of the show, please let us know by following us on Twitter and Instagram at ThatEntertains.